Go ahead, Amy.
Hi, welcome everyone. This is a parent workshop that will hopefully give you some tools to help your beginning reader at home. And my name is Amy Brownstein Lum. I am the literacy specialist at George Peabody. Your PTA dollars help support this position, so I want to thank you right now for all of that support. This is my 15th year at Peabody. I taught third grade for 10 years and first grade for 7. And then this is my fifth year in the position of literacy specialist at Peabody. So I mainly work with first through fifth graders, supporting them in just any extra help that they need in reading and writing and acquiring that skill. I also work with English learners and typically don't work with kindergartners. I do strategize with the kindergarten teachers and I might look in on a special someone, but really at the end of kindergarten, when they've had all of those foundational skills built from the masterful kindergarten teachers, I will check in on anyone that might need a little extra support and then might work with them in first grade. So the first graders I work with are receiving reading recovery lessons. And that's pretty much what I do. How about Liz? Want to introduce yourself?
Yes, good evening. I'm Elizabeth Levett, Fortier, and I teach kindergarten at George Peabody. And this is, I believe, my 15th year or 14th. I'm not positive. I think it's 15th.
15.
Yeah. And I love it. And I work closely with Amy. She's my pal. And we're going to give you some tips tonight that'll help you support your kids. And we both want to say a huge thank you to all of you. You have our utmost esteem right now for all that you're doing. And we really want to be here for you. We want to reassure you. Your kids are going to be fine. They're going to be reading. They're going to be writing. They're going to be fine. But in this climate of distance learning, you have taken on a huge role in supporting their learning. And we want to be support for you and really, really appreciate everybody that's come out tonight. And we hope it's a helpful evening. We will be asking you to stay muted until the end. We're going to breeze through so that folks can get back to their evening. And if you have questions, we ask that you please hold them till the end if you can, because we may very well answer your question before we get to the end. Okay?
Okay, so before we start, I wanted to share this amazing picture of my children who are now 17 and 13. Both were in Miss Levitt's kindergarten class. They were so lucky to have Miss Levett. And this is my son Ty supporting his sister's early beginning reading skills. So he was asking her to point to certain sight words, and it takes a village. So if you have siblings, then they can help too. Okay, so I'm going to go back to the slides. And so I'm just going to share a little bit about what reading is. And reading is the complex cognitive process of decoding symbols to derive meaning. Reading is a means for language acquisition, communication, and sharing information and ideas. It requires that we identify the words in print, a process we call word recognition, construct an understanding from them, which is called comprehension, and coordinate identifying words and make meaning. So reading is automatic and accurate, which is really our goal, and that is called fluency. So balanced reading is when students use, or people in general, we do it too, without really realizing it now, different sources of information to read text. So successful readers use all 3 cueing systems, many strategies and behaviors to extract meaning from the words that they read. Some teachers refer to this as MSV, or meaning, structure, and visual information. So semantic meaning, which is the M in the teacher language, is really the schema, the background information that you bring, or experience that you bring to reading. So a child your age might be able to read the word cat or pig because they see a picture of it and they know what that animal is, and they know how to say that word in English, and that helps them to read the word on the page. The structure, the syntactic, is how words work together, the structure of language. So grammar. So for instance, a child might anticipate the structure in the text they're reading, and that also helps propel them to read the words that they are using together with meaning. And the next piece, which is the visual component, which is looking at letters and knowing the sounds that go with those letters. That's phonemic awareness. And phonics, that letter sound association, which is really what we call decoding. So decoding, reading isn't just decoding. And that's one thing I just want to say before I move to the next slide. Decoding is a very important part of reading. But if we were just decoding and we didn't have background information, vocabulary, or understand how language is strung together, we wouldn't know what we were reading. And so all of these things have to happen successfully in order to be a successful reader. So this is a little fuzzy, but this is more of a visual of what I just explained. So all of these things are happening and overlapping at the same time. And so the structure, or the grammar piece, does it sound right? You know when you misread and it doesn't sound grammatically correct, and a lot of kids with strong verbal skills, strong oral language, will automatically go back and know that something didn't sound right because they have that sort of strong knowledge of structure. The meaning is what we bring to the table, what we know. Does it make sense? If you read or misread, you know that it didn't make sense or it did make sense, and that really also propels your reading. And then the visual piece, does it look right? So what came out of my mouth, does that match what I see on the page and what I know about that letter and what sounds are associated with it? So you can imagine what an amazing task this is for children who are just coming to this work, and we're expecting them to really make these amazing leaps and jumps in a short matter of time. So they're really amazing. And we've only been reading for about 4,000 years as a species. So, okay, so I'm just going to break it down a little bit really quickly. So when we come with prior knowledge and we use meaning to read and to reread and self-correct misreads, we are coming with what we know from our life, from conversations we've had with family, with friends, with people that have read to us, what we know about words, synonyms, antonyms. And so we really want to build that up in our kids. And the way we do that is by talking with them and reading with them. So the structure is really that piece that includes the grammar and how language is strung together. And different languages have different language structures. So of course, if your child is an English learner and you speak a different language primarily in the home, then this might not be as intuitive to your student. And that's okay too. They'll hear a lot of modeling at school, and they will eventually understand. The more you're immersed in a new language, you'll understand the structure of that language. And then that visual piece is that letter that associates with that sound. And that is really when we're teaching phonics and they're using that decoding skill to support their reading. Okay, so having said all of that, I just am wondering, and I can't, I know everyone's muted, but I just want you to think for a minute about if you remember learning how to read. And if you do, I want you to touch your chin. If you remember actually being taught how to read. I think most people don't really remember. And what's amazing is all of these strategies, these sources of information that we use to read, we do it without even realizing it. And our students, your children, are working really hard to remember all of this and put it all together and do it. And so it's really important for us to think about what a task it is and really think about lifting them and supporting them as opposed to pushing them off of the cliff. So we want to support them and lift them off so they're floating. And so these are some ways we can do that. So a few word solving strategies. Miss Levett created this really great little graphic that we use with the kids, which gives them little reminders about what they can do if they really are stuck. If they don't need it, you don't need to point it out. So some word solving strategies you could say would be something like, try it. So if a child sort of pauses or stops, instead of giving them the word right away, you can just encourage them, because confidence plays a huge role in reading success. So sometimes just saying try it will give them that confidence to read a word. And whether they read it correctly or not, that gave them that sort of lift to then start using those pieces of information to look for and help. If it's a known sight word and you know your child knows that word, you might just say, you know this one. Reread and get your mouth ready to say the sounds. So a lot of times a student will sort of get lost in the word and not really know where to begin. And so sort of going back to that beginning sound, that initial sound, if we were reading the word mouth, get your mouth ready to say that beginning sound. And sometimes that's just really the push that they need to get off the ground. Read it with your finger. What I mean by that is taking your finger and running it under a word as you say that word. So sometimes they need to stretch the sounds as they run their finger under it. So if it's a word like cat, which we know is a word they can sound out, just running your finger under it and saying the sounds as you pass underneath might help them to get that new word. And then can you find a part you know? If you know your child knows the word cat, they can okay, why it's not letting me, okay, here we go. Prompts continued. So in the early stages of reading and in these really early reading books, is a lot of visual picture support, which is really meaning. And the pictures are really there to help support the child. So asking if the picture would help is a great prompt, because sometimes they're stuck at the word level, and just to step back and think, oh, it's mother, will help them read. And what would make sense? So using that meaning prompt sometimes can back them away from getting stuck in the visual and that phonics piece. And sometimes just thinking what would make sense will also help them. So for misreads, if you would like to draw your child's attention to something that they misread, you could say, you said they. Can we say it that way? So for instance, if your student said, I saw they cat on the farm, and you know it's supposed to be I saw the cat on the farm, most students would go self-correct that immediately because they know we can't say it that way. So if you said, can we say it that way, it might kind of draw their attention to it. Did that sound right? Or did that make sense? So these are prompts that sort of cue those three systems that we use to read. Okay. I know that was a lot of heady information. And so Miss Levitt's going to help unpack that for us a little bit.
Okay. So Amy, you could do the stop share for a moment. Okay, everybody. So getting down to a little nitty gritty, thank you, Miss B, though. But I want to talk a little bit about high frequency words, or what we call sight words. This is more for me than you, just to remind me. There are about 300 words in the English language that make up more than half of all written material. So once your child has mastered these initial sight words, reading is much faster and much easier. And this is when, like Miss B said, if you see a sight word and you know your child has worked on it, you don't just give it to them right away. You might say, do you know this one? Or even, you know this one. I avoid telling children, sound it out when they hear a sight word. And Miss B and I, we use lots and lots of different prompts. One we rarely use is sound it out. For one thing, the kids are just nailing down all of their letter sounds. And so when they sound something out, they're doing what they do when they segment, they stretch the word out. And what we want them to do is actually blend the sounds together, which is why she said, move your finger through it. We want the sounds blended. So you wouldn't, for example, if they came to the word are, you wouldn't want to say, sound it out, because children who just learned their letter sounds are going to go eh. They're going to say t, ha, eh. We don't want them to do that. We want them to learn sight words by memory. The kindergartners have been learning these first target 25 sight words, and they're doing an amazing job with your help. It's phenomenal. Most of my kids know all their sight words, and they're learning them as they go. There will be another 50 for first grade, which we will make available to you. What I recommend is that, and what I've been doing with them is I send just a few sight words a week so they can do different things with them. Like, for example, we can play a little game. I can take 3 sight words and can and what's the other one? Up, just for an example. And I put them on little cards. I make 2 copies, and I'll put a different sticker on each one. And the child will say, I like the red cats. So you turn over the red cats, and the child has to read the word to you, a word that you've already taught them. The word is and. You say, okay, what other one do you want to turn over? Let's turn over the kittens. Uh-oh. And the child will say, well, it doesn't match. And you say, but what is this word? And so they're getting repeated practice. Turn over this one. Have we seen that before? And this is a game I play a lot with my kindergartners. Another game that we play is we'll just make a game board with the words. Just any swirly line, and you can find online, or I can send them out to folks and put them in the streams. Just a blank parallel line swirl, and you've got a start line and a finish line, and you've got just a few sight words in it, and they roll a dice. When they get it, let's say they get a 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, then they have to read you the word in order to put their marker on it. If they don't read it, they have to go back to start, and you teach them the word. So that's a fun thing that you can do. You want to make it as fun as possible. I found this online. These sight words become anchors in reading. So maybe you're just doing a read aloud, and you want to just pick a few sight words like the, and, said, up, 1, 4, and you're reading them the book Where the Wild Things Are, or some other little read aloud. Have your cards ready, maybe pick out even just 3 words, and have the child point whenever they find the word. We found online a couple of other games. My wonderful student teacher who's here, Kristen Chavaria, I hope I said your name right. Kristen found a game for kids that they can play at home, where you put the words on cards, and large cards, and put them on a door or a wall, and throw a sock at the word and read it when you hit it. I had a child who made a hopscotch with their sight words on a sidewalk, and they went outside and they drop a rock on the word and they had to read the word and then jump on it. Okay, so there's lots and lots of things you can do. It's good for them to write the words, but you don't want to emphasize spelling, because we're not trying to get them to spell the words correctly, because they're not at that stage yet. Okay, so just a few things to do with sight words, and if they can learn a few a week, they're golden. My students in my class are making word walls, so they have a big poster size thingy. If you'll bear with me, I'll show you mine. And they put all their sight words on a big wall, and they add to it as they go along. And we're adding sight words each week. And then they can go to the sight word wall and use those words in their writing. So it's very helpful for them, and they love it. It's fun. Some of them are putting their sight words in little notebooks, so that's fun for them too. You want to try to make it fun as often as possible for them, so that it's not like, oh gosh, we're working. My kids are writing their sight words in a rainbow in lots of different colors, so that's kind of fun for them. So that's just a few things about sight words. The next thing I'm going to show you is good books that you can read with. Oh, you're going to do prompting next? Sorry, I thought.
Yes, that's okay. Yeah, you're after that. Okay, I just wanted to jump off of something that you said about not asking them to write the sight words. So some sight words are also words they're learning to write and read. But as an example, this is a level C book, and look at the snowman's eyes that you're reading. But a first grader or a kindergartner wouldn't be expected to necessarily know how to write the same words that they're reading. So quite often they're reading words at a higher phonetic level than they're learning to write. So they're decoding but not encoding those words. So at every grade level, we're introducing new phonemic patterns, new syllable patterns, and you don't necessarily want to ask them to write some of those, if that makes sense. Okay. All right. We're going to talk a little bit about really great prompts and some things you can say to prompt your student, which I shared a little bit, but praise really builds confidence. A lot of the students I work with just really need a little lifting in first grade. The first thing we work on is building their confidence. And so really noticing the things that they're doing well is a wonderful way to build that confidence. So just saying, I like the way you stopped when you noticed that didn't match and you went back to reread it and checked. Or I like the way you looked at the picture to figure out that tricky word. Looking past the first letter is really important at this stage, because they'll often look at the first letter and then guess the word. So they might see that the word starts with an M and just guess. And so looking past that first letter to the second sound is a really important step. And it may not happen at the beginning, but praising them for doing that is wonderful. And stretching the sounds in the word and reading it again is something that they might need to do. So if it's not a sight word and it's a phonetic word, they may not be able to read the word without stretching it out. And so stretching as opposed to segmenting is very important. So as opposed to cat, but cat, so that they're stringing that together is something I say, stretch it like a rubber band. Sometimes when we're spelling and writing, we are actually tapping out the sounds and stopping and writing that sound, and we're doing it a little bit more choppy. But when we're reading, we really want it to be more of a stretch. And then really to build fluency and expression, we want to talk about sounding like a storyteller or making your voice sound like you're talking or the characters are talking. So even in these low-level books, there's often dialogue. And so getting them early on to sort of hear how it should sound, and they can even copy you modeling it, and praising them if you hear a tiny little piece of expression, even if it's just at the end with a question and sort of an inflected ending. Praising that will really build them up to trying it, because sometimes I think it feels funny for them to use expression when they're reading. So modeling it and really praising them, their efforts when they do it. Oh, one more thing I wanted to mention. Building them up to have success also can be a really great book introduction, and letting them really look at the pictures and look at what the story will be about before they read. It's not a test. So reading is never a test. So we really want them to have as much front loading as possible that they can have before you read with them. And that will, a book introduction can make the world of difference in their success in reading even a tiny little book. Okay.
Thank you, Amy. So I'm going to show you a few books. I have a level A book, a level B, and a level C. And I just want to notice with you the differences and sort of highlight exactly what Amy was talking about. So this first one, this is a level A book. Level A books have a huge amount of picture support. The picture dominates, and then there's only one line of text. Okay? So as Amy was saying, going through beforehand, and I've told my class, do a picture walk first and talk about what you see. Oh, look at that big truck. Wow, what is that? That's a bulldozer. My goodness, look at that ambulance. That's an ambulance, isn't it? And then when they go to read, they can say, a truck is big. They're using a and is and big. Big is decodable, big. And you've already talked to them about the title. This book is called Big Things, Big Things. And you've pointed to it. So you're introducing the book. You're front loading, as Amy said. This is what front loading looks like. And they can also, you can go back and say, there's truck. You can move through it. That's a truck, all right. And then you come to that next page with that big bulldozer. No child at this level is expected to decode that. It's all meaning. And you can say, oh, wow, what a big word. Let's move through it. Wow, there's the O and the Z, bulldozer. You can point out some of the features of the text, but they're not decoding it. Again, they're using the picture and then picture plus first letter. And there's the ambulance, and they're going to say, ambulance is big. And you can go back and say, when it's something like ambulance or apple that starts with an A or an E or an O, we use this word an instead of a. And you just did some instruction. So that's fabulous. So that's prompting with a level A book. Really simple. Just give them the introduction and work with them, and then ask them to read by themselves. And when they come to those words again and they ask you, if they're looking at you, say, remember? And you can tap the picture or just give them wait time. I know we don't like to see them struggle, but even just counting to 5 mentally, just give them that a little bit of time for a productive struggle. It pays off because they're going to kick in those early strategies. Here's a B. They're not going to decode sweater or Oliver. You're going to tell them the title, A Sweater for Oliver. There's Oliver Cat. And you say, oh, look, he's playing with the yarn. Because they may never have seen the word yarn before, but you've previewed the book before you've read it with them, and you're going to show it to them. Oh, look at that. Look at him. He's got the red yarn. And then have the child point, look at the red, and they're going to see a word they've never seen before. And you might just tap the picture. What is that? Yarn. And you'll go, look, it starts with Y, yarn. I like red yarn. And they might, in some of these, I forgot to say, there's the purple. Watch the finger, because sometimes they lose the one-to-one with a double syllable word. They might go, look at the purple, and they get lost, and you go back and say, just one tap for purple. Purple's one word, just one tap. Let's make it match. Look at the purple yarn. Okay, so that's level B, 2 lines. Still lots of picture support and the picture walk, previewing with them and building that prior knowledge, that semantic knowledge is so huge. So you're giving a little scaffolding, a little support. Here's level C, you're getting a little more complex. But again, a picture walk, look at them running. And they might, at this point at level C, their repertoire of sight words should have been built a bit more. So they're going to recognize those anchor words, those sight words, we and can and said and the. And there's 2. And they might say kids, and you can say, does that look right? Can you make it match? And you might even cover it up and say, do you see CH? That goes ch. What's another word for kids, children? So lots of instruction happening, but not too much as they become a little more independent. I want to show you a real quick graph so that we can keep rolling along. What we do when we teach, teachers, our job is to try to build in our own obsolescence. So it's really important we do this thing, we have it tattooed in our blood, the gradual release of responsibility. It's so important that the child is able to experience all levels of support, from complete support to levels of scaffolding, and then ever increasing levels of independence. So in the beginning, lots and lots of read aloud where you're reading and they're watching and listening. They're watching you write. They should see you write things. And we never leave off reading aloud. I still like to be read to. Reading aloud provides phenomenal modeling for your child. And as Ms. B said, they get the fluency, the expression, how words sound right strung together. They get that from you, from hearing you read aloud to them. It's so important. Plus, they get lots and lots of background knowledge. So the first level, that I do, you watch and listen, it's very important. And they don't always have to speak when you're reading aloud. Sometimes we love for our kids to be interactive, but sometimes they need to listen and not butt in and really hear you. The next level, I do, you help. You're reading and having the child join in. Teachers call this shared reading, and we do shared writing also. The adult is doing the work, the child is helping. Can you read the last word with me? You know, those big books that have repeated knowledge, those are so helpful. That rhyme, the repetition, that's when you're going to have them joining in. The next level, you do, and I help. The child is doing the reading or writing with your guidance. You're not kicking the ball for them. You're not telling them the word. You're going back and saying, what sounds right? What makes sense? Do you know this one? Any of those prompts Ms. B mentioned. This is the guided reading. That's where you're helping, but you're not kicking the ball. And then lastly, you do, I watch. The child has to have an opportunity to read or write on their own. And you can watch, but at times you have to step back and let them have those productive struggles. Even when they say, but it's hard. You say, well, that's how you're going to get good at it. And Ms. B has a video to share with you of one of my beautiful students whose parents did not know I was going to feature her tonight until the last possible moment, because I didn't ask permission.
Yeah, that productive struggle is huge. So the learning happens when they're doing that work. Okay, let's open up that. video.
And we'll just watch it really quickly because I want to point a couple of things out when we get to the end.
Okay. Thumbs up if you can see this. Okay, great. I hope you can hear it too. Actually, I think I have to take these off
Yeah,
for you to hear it.
I think so.
Okay.
The title of this book is called Let's Go Out and See the World. See, look. She's looking like she's excited. Open the door. Let's go out and see the world. Let's go out and see the field. Forest. We can hike. I'm going to show that page again. Oh, let's go out and see the mountains. We can climb. I was reading it, so I'll read it again. We can climb. That's the bottom thing here.
You really see her using all sources of information. You can see it happening.
And she goes back and rereads.
Go out and see the. I decided to start reading this again, so I noticed what this word is. This is climb. So I'm going to read this whole page. It was this. I'm going to read this whole page again. Okay? It says, let's go out and see the mountains. We can climb. Let's go out and see the meadow. We can rest. Let's go out and see the beach. We can run. Let's go out and see the ocean. We can splash. Let's go out and see the sunset. We can look. Whoa. Or wow. I don't really. I think it's wow. I'm going to pause it.
Okay, we can stop at that point if you want.
Action. Oh, and there was also this. Out, go.
So if an adult told her every word that she stopped at, none of that beauty would have happened. That's just remarkable. She's spent some time on it. There's an expectation that she's gonna keep at it.
And she's cross-checking. So you can see she's checking the visual piece of the letters. She's checking the picture. She's thinking, what are we talking about? What would make sense? So you can actually see, and it's often hard to see what they're thinking, but you can almost see that she's monitoring and cross-checking all of those sources of information to make sure that she's reading what she sees. So thank you for sharing that. And thank you, Sierra's parents.
She's remarkable. All right.
So do you want to talk about writing stages a little bit?
Yes. So just really quickly, I think we've covered everything that we meant to cover with reading, but I also wanted to jump into writing a little bit because that's another area where we want to gradually fade back the support and have the child work on their own. There have been several studies that have shown that when children stretch out sounds to write new words on their own without an adult telling them how to spell the word, they actually, those are the strongest readers. The children that learn how to do that, that are given an opportunity to work on their own, on their writing, those are the strongest readers. That's where reading strength really happens. It's remarkable. So I want to show you some writing stages so that just to reassure you that this is all normal, it's all expected, and they need to go through these stages. Okay, so first of all, I have this little friend, Lula, who's now at university somewhere in Indiana. And this is Lula's Monster House. And she wrote this label for her Monster House. Monster House. So the first thing the child does once they move beyond just scribbling and writing strings of letters that aren't connected to sounds, the first thing they'll do is put the initial sound, the M for monster and the H for house. And that's fine. And you say, great job, you did that all by yourself. We don't say you're not really writing. We don't say you don't know how to spell it. Let me spell it for you. You dictate it and I'll write it. We don't step in and kick the ball. We say, great job, M for monster, period. I wonder what you'll do tomorrow. Tomorrow they'll do something else. Like here, the same little girl made a rocket. And now she doesn't just have the initial sounds. This was a couple of weeks later. This is rocket. And look, she's got the initial sound, the final consonant, and this medial dominant consonant, rocket. Those are the sounds she heard, and she knows the letters for them. So that's what she put. Okay, and then here we have, I live, LV, close to the beach. Fabulous development. It's slow and steady, and then suddenly it takes off. Just like when your child is learning to speak, they only speak one word, and then suddenly they speak two words, and then 11, and then 100. That's how it goes. But you have to let them go through the stages on their own, and you have to expect that they're going to need some time alone for those productive struggles. Here is I'm waiting for the bus. Look at bus. They've got a vowel in there. I'm waiting for the bus. Here's a really advanced one. Check this out. I am a scientist. Fabulous. This is dragon. Nobody said to this child, you spelled it wrong. You say, wow, look at all your letters. You've even got the DR. Wow, good for you. Move on. I love nature. Here's turtle family. They wrote family and then turtle to specify who these guys are. I can't not save this stuff. This is jungle flower, which is amazing. And here's a really long piece, fire. No, it says 4 nice fire alarms. They started from the bottom. 4 nice fire alarms. Because there is a fire. So they're writing from the bottom to the top. Eventually they'll start writing across the page. So that's pretty interesting. And here's a garden that I thought you'd like. So just an idea of the stages that they go through and why it's so important to let them go through it instead of trying to run on the field and kick the ball.
Are we ready for questions?
I think we are ready for questions. I'm in my hot flash big time, so that's usually when questions come up.
I'm happy to have you just unmute and ask, or if you want to type it into the chat, we can moderate that.
Do you want to stop recording, Miss B, or keep recording?
Well, I think it might be helpful if other people,
Okay.
Someone
might have the same question. Okay.
Yeah.
So please feel free to unmute. I'll put us on gallery view and people can jump in with their questions.
One
Kate,
thing I also wanted to say,
sorry.
thinking about every word doesn't have to be read correctly. So if there are minor mistakes
Oh.
in small sight words like in instead of on, those are things you can let it go. You know, you want to pick your battles. So maybe pick one or two things at the end of a page or the end of a book that you would like to go back and talk about or help them with. But
I'm
if
so
they're
glad you
reading,
brought that up.
yeah, if they're reading happily along, that's just overwhelming. So just, you know, one or two picks. And then predicting and locating beforehand. So picking a word you think they might know, having them find it on the page before they read that book.
And I just thought of something else. I'm sorry. Please try not to push as much as we want our children to advance. If they're miscuing or struggling with more than one word on a page, don't try to move them further. Let them stay at that level for a while until they're super, super comfortable. Because sometimes we tend to be eager and we want to push our kids, and he wants to read Harry Potter, and you know, there's time to build that. Don't.
So
Don't
there's a question around grade level expectations. So at the end of kindergarten, they're supposed to be, the district expects them reading at a level C and D. So an instructional D, that's where the expectation is. And then in first grade, it has the most levels. So first grade goes through levels C, D, all the way up through an IJ. So first grade has a lot of work. There's a lot of work that happens in first grade. Thank you for that question.
Kate, did you have a question?
Well, it was, you sort of touched on it anyway, but it's regarding the releasing dependence, the I do, you watch, I do, you help, you do, I help, you do, I step back. Like, how do we know what level? Like, it's hard as a parent to know when to step back, and I that's really
that's a great question. I'm so glad you asked that. What I do in the classroom is I provide front loading, and then I give some guidance, and then I say, okay, I want you to try this on your own. And I try to hit every level every day. Like I'll put out my plan book. We did a study with our teachers at a high need school I was at, and we had our teachers go through your lesson plans for the week. Where are your ones? Where are your twos? Where are your threes? Where are your fours? And we found that teachers had maybe 1 and 4, and they weren't building in enough of the mid-range scaffolding. And I think the reverse is true with parents, because you guys are shut in and you want to help. You want them to succeed. You don't want them to struggle. And I get it. And plus they might be fighting you because they're with you all day, which
right,
is
they're not always presenting what they know when they're with their parent. I see even someone I'm working with now, he's more successful when his mom's not in the room. There's something about mom being in the room that where he sort of defaults to, I don't know as much as I do. So I empathize with you as a parent for sure. It's hard to know what are you capable of on your own and how much support should I give you. It's tricky right now.
But I would say try to build in increments, attainable goals, attainable increments. No, today I want you to work all by yourself for 5 minutes, and then and give tons of praise. Wow, you did a lot by yourself. I'm so proud of you. Okay, then move on. And the next week, maybe 10, until by the end of the year, they can write on their own and read on their own for 20 minutes. In the classroom, at this point, I would be having them reading and writing by themselves for 10 to 15 minutes every day. And then I pull them in conference with them. I'm not just, checking my phone or drinking coffee. I mean, kind of drinking coffee, but, they have to have, I always say to my student teachers, Amy Berry is here, Daniel's mommy, and she was one of my student teachers. And I always used to say to her, step away from the children. because we
Yeah.
want to hover. We don't want them to struggle. They have to struggle or they're not going to be able to do it on their own. Yes, Amy.
I have a question, which you kind of touched on. Let's see, is this mic working? Is this on?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yes.
And that's with the disconnect between her reading level and her spelling level, kind of thing. And I have finally turned a sudden page in getting her to be more willing to put pen to paper and commit to those words instead of running back and saying, I think it's this, before she'll write it down. Using Miss Levitt's encouragement of words, saying your job is to be a writer, not a speller. That's next year.
One thing you can do is
but-
have her use a practice page. Actually, finish your thought because I'm not sure if you're going where I'm thinking.
So I guess my question is, she finished off a book, for example, and she's writing lots of stuff now. I mean, it's an outpour of stuff, but the longer it is from when she wrote it, the harder time she's having in reading it, because she can't read her own writing, but she could read the same thing that she wrote if it were in a book. And I'm now, in a several week kind of period of, okay, what do I do now? And now she's saying, but this isn't how she sees the same words in books now, saying, but that's not how you spelled it, because I wrote it like this. And we're in this like jumbled heap of spelling and reading. And I don't know what to do about that.
I'm going to have Ms. B handle that one.
Well, my first,
She's got.
My first question is she spelling them correctly, or she's not, and then she can't go back and reread her writing?
Exactly. I mean, she spells
Okay.
some things correctly, and she spells, I mean, I could probably grab
No,
an
I know
example,
what you mean.
and then
So one thing
other things not.
that the kindergarten and first grade teachers will do is they will translate it underneath or on a separate piece of paper. So if you can catch her in the moment, and I don't know how far she gets without you, but if you could have her read it to you in the moment, then you can transcribe what it says for her. And they don't take offense to it. They usually know. And so you have, well, hopefully, and you can, I don't know how you want to phrase it, but they're not expected to know how to spell everything that they want to write. So having that transcription handy, then you can help her when she goes back to reread those books. But this is the workshop model. I mean, we do this in the classroom regularly. And so they're writing pages and pages and making books, and they often can't go back and read what they wrote. It's a challenge across at least K1, sometimes second grade.
So
But,
do you correct them later, like a week later or something, and they say, but do you then tell them the proper way of spelling?
No.
Never.
No, especially if it's something they're just not going to hold on to because it's an advanced pattern. They're just not there yet. But one thing we do is use a practice page. So if you're working with her and she wants to work out the word before she writes it, you can help her write it on a practice page just to get the sounds. And if she's representing a letter for a sound that's not correct, but it does make that sound, then that's okay to go with that at that point. Because if she spells a word with a K instead of a CK,
right,
that's okay. And then she can copy it into her writing because it does say that. And she may not have learned that digraph yet.
right.
So even though she can see it and she's reading it, it's a different part of the brain that you're pulling that information from to actually write it. And some kids are stronger writers than readers. So it just really depends.
Okay.
But we really want them to focus on message making. Like reading is message deriving, writing is message making. If she's making the message, then you say, great job, let's write something else tomorrow, and just put it away. And we're just say, this is not about spelling. This is your creative time, making a message, and I get it.
Right.
Can I just ask a question that dovetails that?
Yeah.
So now I've got a first grader, and I mean, that's kind of been our rule of thumb. He actually did 2 years of kinder, so he's when he asked me to spell a word, typically I've said, sound it out first, try to get him to do it. But now he's to a point where he wants to spell correctly, and he's asking me all the time. So do I have permission yet to just tell him how to spell the words when he's asking me how to spell them, or should I encourage that sounding out?
It depends on the word, just like in reading. If you know it's a word that they have not covered in word work in class, give it to them. It's fine. But if you know what they're doing in class and they've covered, vowel, consonant, E or whatever, wherever they are now, then I would have him try it as much as he can. And if you want to go back and edit it with him, that's something they're learning to do also. So you could go back and edit. If you know he's learned that already, it's okay for him to fix it. If it's a pattern or word they haven't learned yet, then I don't think there's a need to fix it. Does that make sense?
That's helpful. Thank you.
Yeah.
And just to clarify, that's more for the kindergarten parents, that's more appropriate for first grade than kinder.
Yes,
With
that's for first grade.
We're not going to go back and correct the spelling because it's going to be stale by then. They get tired of stuff quickly and they want to move to the next thing.
This is specifically for first and up. This is something that they're doing in writing workshop. Yeah.
This is kind of related. But what's the party line on why English makes no sense? Like when it should be an X, but it's 2 C's, or whatever it is. Like I don't want to create this negative feedback loop of like, well, you're gonna have to figure it out one day and memorize it. But I have this like super linear logical thinker who wants to know why, like the GH in laugh is an F. And I'm like,
you could say that our language is made up of many, many different languages.
Yeah.
And that's really why.
What I teach them is sometimes when your relatives come over, there might be leftovers in the fridge when they leave, or maybe they left their gloves on the piano. Sometimes people come and visit you and they leave stuff behind. This is a country that's, our country and Europe. These people have moved around for millennia, and so when a group of people leaves one part of the world and goes to another part, and then they leave again, they might leave part of their language behind. So we have little bits of German and Dutch and French and all kinds of Indo, that's what I tell them. They just, it's stuff that was left over.
And if your child's interested, I mean, it's actually fascinating, I think. And I've learned a lot about language and acquiring language and spelling patterns over the years. So there are some really cool YouTube videos on why GH says F and things like that. So you could even look into it, because it is fascinating. It's interesting. And you'll come to realize that there's a reason for it all. That's what's so interesting to me about it, is you actually, when you find out, it makes sense. Those are Anglo-Saxon, or these are all Greek. So they all have this, this, whatever the base is. And so it's interesting.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right. There's one of her pretty cats.
Oh, one more.
Oh, we have one more. Okay, go ahead, Amy.
I'll ask another one, but I already asked one, so I don't want to. If somebody else has one, please feel free to go.
Well, we're going to wrap up soon.
Okay.
Go ahead.
The question is about the importance of rereading the same little reader, let's say. How important is it, I guess, that she goes through the whole thing more than once? If there's pushback on it, kind of thing, like how much do I try to encourage it? And also, it seems like the next time she's reading it, it's more off of memorization than, because then it's just, flies through kind of thing. And so I don't know that she's actually trying to read it anymore.
Well, I always recommend that they reread it until they really have it smoothly. And as Amy said, once she's read it and she doesn't want to read it again, say, can you read it to me in a teacher voice? Or sometimes I'll put in the lesson plan, can you read your book in a monster voice or in a funny voice, or can you read it in a mouse voice? Read all the words the way a mouse would read them, or a rabbit.
Right,
And
because the first time through they're decoding and they're working to solve. And then the second time through they've solved all those words. So now it's their chance to read it smoothly, fluently,
fluently.
accurately. So that's really where that is built. So rereading familiar books is really important. And I like your idea, Liz, about reading it in different voices. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
My gosh. And thank you, Miss B. You are phenomenal.
Thank you, Miss Levett. You are a master.
Bless us, everyone.
Good luck, everyone, with the rest of the week. Have a wonderful break.